look at the rest of the encyclical now, and then at... Oh, brother, that's not gonna... At 4:30, I think we'll have a look at, take a glance at Michael Davis's book on religious living in Vatican II. Again, I've done a one-page chart of that book, and it's good. It's well done. So that you know gives you what happened to this doctrine at Vatican II, and they simply just changed it to fit the modern world, quite simply. But I hope that will enable you to see the man-centered version of liberty and the God-centered version of liberty. It's not basically very complicated, but by golly, that document was, the document on religious liberty, Vatican II, was so cleverly done that all of the bishops, most of the bishops fell for it. And finally the document was voted through. This is cleverly done. It's a real weasel thing. So, we might have a look at the document itself, but that's difficult because it's so slippery. It's a real quicksand. Because it keeps appealing to your emotions and making you feel good, and then at the same time it brings in the traditional doctrine and it tries to fit the two together. How the two fit together. It's a masterpiece of reconciling the irreconcilable. And it can only have been done by somebody who was deeply convinced that there's no real clash.
Wasn't that
John de Courtenay Murray, yes. Yes, it was. But he didn't know his... Well, they say that back in the early 40s he did know his Catholic doctrine. But then he changed it, so... All right, let's have a look at the false liberty of speech. 23, that's not very complicated. As for liberty of the press, it means oppression of the people by subtle, flattering, and deadly errors. And that's, of course, exactly what you see today, in fact. What we have today is the media which are just lying through their teeth all the time, and the people buy it. The people buy it. It's skillfully done. The people are flattered, the people are cajoled, the people are deceived, and that's what freedom of the press means. I don't know what Thomas Jefferson would have said if he'd seen today's press. Would he still have said freedom of the press is a good thing? But today's press isn't free. Today's press is actually strictly censored, but in the opposite direction. And yet the people think it's free. So that's the result of liberty of the press. What was Thomas Jefferson essentially missing out on? What did he just leave out of account? Original sin, that's it, yeah. I mean, this is where Catholics stay in touch with reality, where all the liberals are just way out in the left field. The liberals don't believe in original sin, and that they just get everything wrong as a result, because original sin is a fact. Liberty of teaching. What the doctrine and then how the church has behaved in the matter. As for liberty of teaching, in other words, freedom to teach what you like, is likewise contrary to the good of men's minds, which is truth alone. You see that? What's that an example of again? The good of men's minds is the truth. What's that? What's he doing there that we did here?
He is God. He is God.
Yes. When you say that the good of men's mind is truth, what are you saying?
There's something outside.
There's something outside. In other words, the mind has an end outside of itself, which is truth. And the liberals say the truth is shutting in my own mind, so I am the measure of truth. The liberals say I am the measure of truth. The Catholics say the truth is the measure of truth. The truth is the measure of my mind. The liberal says my mind is the measure of truth. The truth is whatever my mind makes it. That's insane. But the Catholic says it's whatever is out there that's the measure of my mind. I mean, on this desk there are 2 books and not 3 or 5 or 15. There's the Libertas, and then there's the purple book, and then there's a few papers, but there are 2 books and not 3, not 1, not 15. The reality is the measure of my mind. But the liberal doesn't like that. Why not? Because I'm restricted. I'm not at liberty to say that there are 3 books or 5 books. It's very restrictive to say there are only 2 books, to be only able to say that there are 2 books. And that's their attitude. As long as the object is imposing itself upon me, I don't have real liberty. Therefore, I am going to liberate my mind from the object, and then I will have liberty. It's insanity. You see what liberty means to them? Liberty means my affirmation that I am the God and creator. I am in control. I am even in control of whether this is purple or green or pink or brown or black. These people are insane.
Do they also deny truth as being absolute and immutable too?
Absolutely they deny it. Absolutely they deny it. Truth is just what men make it. Jim.
I think it's sort of like the improvement that was made on Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Some said, no, actually it's backwards. You got it backwards. I am, therefore I think. I think you can make a case for that with what you're saying here, that people who think it true, the truth, when the truth is out there.
Yes. Yes, Descartes is the beginning of modern philosophy. His thinking is coming in front of reality. I think, therefore I am. The reality of me comes after the reality of my thinking. So if I want to think that I'm an elephant, I think I'm an elephant, therefore I am an elephant. You know, I mean, he's putting thinking in front. But reality is in front, not thinking. Thinking always comes after reality. Because you can't think something thunk without its being real. For anything to be thunk or thought, it's got to be a reality. Even if I think of a unicorn which doesn't really exist, what am I doing?
You're creating it in that sense.
Creating it in that sense, but what am I creating it out of? Things that are a reality. There's one animal that does have a horn, and there are other animals like a horse that have 4 legs and a trunk, and that don't have a horn. But I put together the horn of one animal, which is real, with thoughts must always go back to reality. That's what Catholics say. Even fantastical thoughts have to go back somehow to some reality. But the liberals say, no, my mind is completely free. I can make up what I like in my mind, and that is the measure of reality. Where ought people to finish up who make their minds the measure of reality? Who make their minds, if they make their minds into the measure of reality, where should they finish up?
Insane.
Correct, in the funny farms. Why don't they finish up? Why don't all these liberals finish up in the funny farms? David?
I think because the good sense God gave every man keeps him from carrying it to its logical extreme.
Yes. In other words, they're very selective. For instance, when they want to walk out of this room, do you think any of them says that my thought says that that is a door? Funnily enough, all of them finish up saying, my thought says that that's a door. And so funnily enough, despite what they think, they all happen to walk out of the door. They're very, very selective about where their system kicks in and where it doesn't. And as you say, therefore their common sense enables them to exist. Supposing they came down in the morning and looked at that cup of black coffee and said, my thought says that that's poison. Where would they finish up? They'd finish up somewhat hungry and thirsty, wouldn't they? They aren't hungry and thirsty. Why? Because funnily enough, when it comes to judging that little, thinking that little black cup funnily enough, then they decide that that is coffee.
Satan don't mean anything by their thinking that it's poison. But he does mean their other types of thought, which...
Well, yeah, their mind, you know, they're selective, where they choose when to control reality by their thinking, and when to, by chance, make their thinking coincide with reality.
Who controls that? Do they as a human?
Oh, yes.
Is there an outside?
Oh, no, they as humans, they may be under the influence of Satan, but it's with their free will that they use this system of selective real reality and selective virtual reality, or selective my reality and selective out there reality. They choose.
Each time?
Oh, of course. Each time they get into the car, they crank the starter. They don't crank the trafficator. what do you call that?
One school, so to speak, down the river, they're zombies under a...
Their minds are selectively unhooked from reality. That's the truth of the matter. And therefore they stay enough in touch with reality to survive, but they stay out of touch with reality enough not to have to adore the real God, enough to make themselves into God. In fact, they're in contradiction. They're contradicting themselves all the time. They survive thanks to their common sense. They kick out God thanks to their craziness. And then they fit somehow or other, they fit the craziness and the common sense together.
And they run for politics.
And then they run for politics, you bet. But it's not just the politicians' fault. The people love these politicians who tell them, you'll get something for nothing. Anybody can get something for nothing, and I guarantee you something for nothing. That's the sure way to get voted in. So the people love it. It's not the politicians' fault. It's the people's fault. It's the dumb people that elect these politicians. They're all at fault.
There has to be a starting point for them, though, doesn't there?
The starting point for?
Starting point. In other words,
does it start with?
They don't all go to school to learn this. They are this way. They choose to be this way. I can't follow their thinking.
They are now taught this way in school. In school, their minds are disconnected from reality, and in the universities. If you go to any modern university and want to study philosophy, the first philosophy course will nearly always be disconnecting your mind from the senses. You'll be given examples to prove that your senses are not reliable. For instance, when you were asleep, you thought you were being chased by a great elephant, and then you woke up, and that proves that your senses were completely unreliable, right? That's how they argue. Or you put a stick in water, and it looks as though the stick is bent, but you know perfectly well the stick isn't bent, because you pull it out again, it's perfectly straight. Therefore, your senses are unreliable. See? And they've got various other examples of that. They line up a number of... So my senses don't tell me what's out there, so I don't know what's out there. Therefore, I'm free to say what's out there. That's the way modern philosophy works. It's crazy.
Well, fine for those who go to school, but for those who don't and have the same thinking...
Where do they pick it up?
Where do they get it? You know?
From the newspaper, from the media, from television, from the media. All of the television people think this way. All the university professors think this way, all the schools think this way. And through the media, it just catches everybody.
The psychiatrist touch?
You were also told it there, yes. You're also told it by the psychiatrists.
Well, I know some people who haven't been to college, they're just high school graduates.
Right.
They're out in the working area,
right.
in the field working, and they think this way.
Yes.
They haven't been, they probably don't watch that much television either, some of them don't.
But it's
still their thinking is...
That's right. Well said, because this thinking is now everywhere. Everybody's doing it, as the expression goes. Everybody's thinking it. Everybody's thinking like this. It's taken time to get to that point, but it's over the last 20, 30 years, it's snowballed, especially since the Church unhooked from reality with Vatican II. As long as the Catholic Church was still anchored in reality, something held. There was some resistance and there was an anchor. But when the Catholic Church gave up, that was the end of the game. The game was over, so to speak. Yeah? When the Catholic Church said that virtual reality is real reality, that fantasy is reality, and when the Catholic Church hitched up her skirts and began jiving and rocking and rolling like everybody else.
Well, I'm not even sure that some of the people I know would understand that. It's just that they've picked it up. Their thinking is just like this.
That's it.
I've wondered how in the world they've come to this conclusion. How can they...
Because everybody around them is like it.
Okay.
And it's filtered from the top downwards. It's filtered from the universities downwards, especially from the universities. Okay. Immanuel Kant, who's at the back of all of this, we may look at Pascendi tomorrow because that's so basic. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher back at the beginning of the end of the 1700s, the beginning of the 1800s. And then he was a rare case. but it's just snowballed. It's snowballed through German philosophy into French and English philosophy, from philosophy into the other departments of the university, from the universities into the schools, from the universities to the schools into the media, the universities, the schools and the media into the people. That's how it works. But it was launched by a university professor, Immanuel Kant in Königsberg. So Pius X said, Il Kantismo è l'eresia moderna. Kantism is the modern heresy, meaning this unhooking of the mind from reality. We may take a look at it tomorrow. It's very basic, very, very basic. And it's the explanation of what you meet with whenever you walk into a Novus Ordo church. But it's also the expression of what you meet with in the workplace and everywhere today. And that's why, yes, they are, exactly. And that's why if you've got a head which still works, it's like talking Greek to all of these people whose heads don't work. The head is capable of committing suicide. I mean, how can a comparison? You know, if I'm driving a motor car and I, you know, take a yank on the brake cable so that the brake cable comes up, I'm capable of destroying the brake cable, but once I've yanked it up, I can't put it back. And the car from then on was without brakes. If I use my mind to pull up the anchor in reality, I can pull it up. But I said it's going to take a very special grace to put it back. And so long as the anchor is pulled up, my mind is just floating all over the place. Some people like having floating minds. A lot of people like having floating minds. They're free from reality. I don't have to pay the mortgage bill because the mortgage bill is unreal. I don't have to pay this, I don't have to listen to this, I don't have to take that. And then when the wife comes home and says, hey, that's nonsense, what does he turn around and say to her? I don't have to take that from you. I don't have to take that from anybody. I don't have to take that. I'm floating free. I don't have to take reality. So get lost. She, poor gal, you know, then just flips her lid. What can she do? The men are going, people today are crazy. They are literally crazy. But they are selectively crazy. They stay in touch with reality enough to walk through the door rather than try walking through the wall. But the logical conclusion, as David Perry says, their common sense means that they don't apply the system completely logically. But if they were completely logical about the stick being crooked in the water, and therefore I can't rely on my senses, if they were completely logical, I would have to go around all the wall groping to try to find the door, and even then, how would I know that my hands were telling me the truth? My senses are lying, right? I would feel that I couldn't even try to walk to the door. I would go crazy. They don't go crazy. They don't go, at least clinically crazy. They don't go clinically crazy because their common sense keeps going enough to make sure that they survive. But they are ideologically crazy. And the mass of people walking around, walking up and down the street today are ideologically crazy.
Well, perhaps that also explains the prevalence of mental disease.
Yes.
Schizophrenia is essentially
yes.
this carried to its truth. I mean, these people really
yes.
trust their senses.
Yes.
They might be clinically crazy if they lived in a not a crazy world, but when everyone around them
exactly
think the same way.
Exactly.
I mean,
then it's perfectly normal.
Professor Feather, put all the crazy people now in charge, and all the sane people are in the straitjackets, and everybody's crazy.
That's right. That is, in my opinion, that is basically John Paul II's problem. Because he, with this crazy thinking, honestly thinks that it's completely normal. And insofar as everybody else thinks the same thing, it is normal. All the cardinals, all the bishops, except for a few, they all think it's normal. And therefore, as far as he's concerned, it's normal.
Is this because the grace of their knowledge has been withdrawn because they turned their back on the Lord?
Yes.
Either it's law. I mean,
yeah, they've
average Joe is a bishop or cardinal or like that.
They've turned their backs on God.
Very intellectual people. They say their word.
Yeah, but the more intellectual are, the more stupid they are. Very often today. Today, the fact that they've gone through, the more university degrees somebody has got today, the more you want to be suspicious whether he's got any sanity left. University degrees today are not an indication of sanity, they're a very likely indicator of insanity. So, you know, the world has gone completely mad. Let me give you a graphic example of a friend of mine. He said, in the military, what was it? Oh gosh. He had, women in combat. You know, they put women on the US Navy ships now. And they've not had time to change the accommodations on the ships. So you can imagine what. So this ship was docking in New York. This is just a couple of months ago. Was docking in New York, and the captain and lieutenantesses, or lieutenantess, the officers and officeresses, or officerettes, in other words, the women officers, they went to some nightclub in New York and they began dancing, and finally the nightclub had to throw them out. They came back to the ship, and the captain by this time was highly interested in one of the officeresses, and he told the sailors that since she had had a little much to drink, she would need to be watched over for the night, and he would do the watching over. Well, the rest you can imagine. He's been fired. I mean, he lost his command of the ship, of course. It lasted the whole night. And, but it's inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. To say, you know, to put men and women together on a ship and then send them to sea, I mean, they are crazy if they think this kind of thing isn't going to happen. But they absolutely solemnly pretend, everybody pretends to everybody else that this is not going to happen. And then it happens, of course, every single time.
What about sending them in outer space?
They're already spaced out.
But she's been up in space for 3 weeks.
Oh, man.
There hasn't been that much loss.
Several months. There's a 6-week extension on that. She's got 3 or 4 kids at home.
Oh. Do you remember that one there was a woman on board Challenger when Challenger blew up, and she had 2 young children. Oh. It's insanity, absolute insanity.
With the Russians up there?
Yes, I think there is. You know, it's you know, this craziness. The Pope is trying to say, look, guys, there's a reality out there. There's a purpose out there. There's a heaven out there which we've got to get to. And so we need to limit natural liberty to moral liberty, and we need laws in order to guide natural liberty to being moral liberty. But these people know there's no such thing. There's nothing out there. We are it. We are it. You know, Toys R Us, and we are it. We are it, period. Okay, so let's just pull up our skirts and enjoy ourselves, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. It's insanity. But it's the way everybody is today. Therefore, it's completely normal. In the old days, insane people used to be abnormal. Today, they're normal. And so everybody, and there's a pressure. There's a positive pressure to join everybody else in the insanity. Because so long as you resist being insane like everybody else, you stick out. And you're an implied criticism of their craziness. So they're pressuring you to join in the craziness. They don't want you to go on reminding them that there is something outside of man which judges man and which measures man. But the Pope said it. The Popes argued this, but people didn't listen. Some people listened to the Popes, but not enough. And so finally in the 1960s, the Popes gave up and said, okay, guys, we'll pull up our skirts too and enjoy ourselves, so let's get jiving. And now I hope everybody, you will love us and be nice to us, because we're fooling around just like you're fooling around. And that's the way it is today. So let's have a look at what Leo said. Liberty of the press means oppressing the people by subtle, flattering, and deadly errors. Liberty of teaching is contrary to the good of men's minds, which is truth. See, the Pope says the good of a man's will is the objective good which is out there, and the good of a man's mind is the truth which is out there. Therefore, the mind, as Chesterton said, he said it very well. I always thought that a person opened his mouth only to, he said, I always thought that an open mind was like an open mouth. A man opens his mouth only in order to close it again on something he's eating. If you open your mouth, it's in order to put something in and eat it, and close your mouth and eat it. If you open your mind, it's in order to put something in your mind, reckon that it's true, and once you know that it's true, close your mind on the truth and shut out error. But no, the liberal, the open mind is a value in itself, because there's no such thing as truth. So the more birds that come in and then leave their droppings and fly out again, the better. That's how the liberal sees the life of the mind.
There's no beauty. I mean, we hope there's no beauty.
There's
no morality.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing.
That's right.
A valueless system.
That's it. No morality, no beauty, no values, no standards, no nothing except just what I like from one moment to the next. What suits me, what I like from one moment to the next. It's insanity. But the good of men's minds is truth. And it's only truth. And there is a truth out there which men's minds can reach. But do you know, there was a seminarian from California, where else, who told me that he went home one day. I mean, the seminarian was listening to all of this in the seminary. He went home one Christmas vacation, and he was talking to his grandparents, who were good people. They're paying for his tuition at the seminary. And he said he got into a discussion with them, and he said, well, now, and you know, they sure enough, they got back to basics, and they got back to reality. And he said, look, 2 and 2 is 4, he said. Do you know what his grandfather answered? Grandfather, not just some 22-year-old juvenile delinquent, but his grandfather. His grandfather said, yes, but give our computers a little longer, and 2 and 2 will no longer be limited to being 5. That's what his grandfather said to him. In other words, computers are a great help in unhooking people's minds from reality. Or people, sinners, use computers in order to help unhook their minds from reality. It's not the computer's fault. But let's say that the existence of the computers doesn't hinder any. So, and so, liberty of teaching must be controlled, both for natural truths, which are the very bond of society, and for supernatural truths, because if you disregard supernatural truths, it means everlasting perdition. And so, teaching must be controlled, it must be censored, it must be Catholic censored. If you teach natural error, it's going to unhinge society, says the Pope, which natural society hangs together by natural truth. And if you disregard natural truth, you're going to destroy natural society. And then as for supernatural truth, if you teach the opposite of supernatural truth, which is heresy, you're going to send souls to hell. So if you want society to survive, and if you want souls to go to heaven and not to go to hell, you've got to Catholic censor teaching. And you can't afford to have the classrooms with anybody just saying anything. It's clear, it's absolutely clear. But that's assuming, of course, that there is a reality out there, which is exactly what your modern people have finished up by denying. There's a famous Latin saying which says, those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. And the gods surely want to destroy modern Western civilization, because modern Western civilization is just gone mad. It's gone mad. Not clinically, but ideologically mad. That's freedom of teaching. What does the church do? The latter, the supernatural truths, guard the natural truths. That's an important point. The supernatural truths are like the outer covering of the natural truths. For instance, the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of our Blessed Lady. In other words, that Our Lady's life began with an immense privilege of an Immaculate Conception free of original sin, and that her time on earth ended with the immense privilege of her being assumed body and soul to heaven, gives to this woman a tremendous dignity and value which spins off on all women. You can't make, if those two things are true, the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, there's a limit to what filth you can tip out onto woman. Therefore, the nature of woman is protected. The natural truth about woman, the truth about woman naturally, is protected by these glorious supernatural truths. The great supernatural truths are the protection of the natural dignity of woman. Whereas if you strip away the great supernatural truths, you're free to destroy, to attack and destroy the natural dignity of woman. The supernatural dignity of woman is like a shield protecting the natural dignity of woman. And that's why these popes, Pope Pius IX and Pope Pius XII, defined these two dogmas in our terrible modern age, which strips woman of all dignity. The Catholic Church defends the natural dignity of woman by block defending the supernatural privileges of the Mother of God. Therefore, that he says, that's why he says, 27, the supernatural truths guard and protect the natural truths. The Church guards both, and by guarding both, promotes the true liberty of minds to achieve the truth which is outside of those minds. Therefore, the Church is the defender of the true liberty of the mind. The true liberty of the mind is to get access to the truth. That's the real liberty of the mind. Like the liberty of the Boeing is to fly across the Atlantic, the real liberty of the mind is to fly to the truth. And the Church protects the truth and protects the mind getting to the truth. Therefore, the Church is the defender of real liberty. Therefore, when the Church censors teaching in the classrooms, she's protecting the real liberty of the minds. She's protecting this liberty of the mind by controlling this liberty of the mind. The Church is not condemning the natural liberty of the mind. The Church is simply limiting the natural liberty so that it won't crash but will fly to the truth. So that it won't crash into error but will fly to the truth. Therefore, the Masons are liars when they say that the Church is against scientific research, the Church is against science, the Church is against freedom of research. It's lies, absolute lies. The Church is not, the Church is the mother of all universities all real universities down the ages. The Masons don't produce universities, or if they do, they're monkey universities, they're Mickey Mouse universities. Or they're modeled on the old Catholic universities, but it's the Catholic Church that has always built universities. The Freemasons empty and make a monkey of the universities. Look at Berkeley today. That's not a university, that's a monkey den. Very little pursuit of truth going on in Berkeley because there's very little Catholicism in Berkeley. But here in the United States recently, in the Catholic universities, you get all of these idiotic, supposedly Catholic teachers saying, we want more liberty. The Church must give us more liberty. The Church gives them liberty by censoring the nonsense, by controlling the nonsense. If you eliminate the faults out of the 747, it's going to be free to fly. But if you leave all the engine full of faults, it's going to crash. The Church the Church engineers go in and clean out the faults from people's minds by her censorship, and then the minds can fly to the truth. So, the Church guards both natural truth and supernatural truth, and therefore promotes real liberty, which is the liberty of the mind to fly to the truth. Likewise, history shows that by defending the faith, the Church has favored all true learning. There would be no modern science if there hadn't been the medieval Catholic Church. No way. And yet liberals want all license. They want all license, all false freedom for their teaching. They want to be able to teach lies or truth regardless, because they want to be free. They don't want to have a truth out there which is checking them. They want to talk any nonsense they like. And they want all license for their own teaching, and they want no freedom for the truth of the Church. They're delinquents. They're satanic. Liberals are satanic. Liberals are rodents. If you take one thing away from these 4 days, remember that. Liberals are rodents. R-O-D-E-N-T-S. Liberals are rodents. They are. All right. The best of them are unconscious of the fact, but the worst know perfectly well that they're rodents. In any case, whether they know it or not, they are rodents. They're gnawing away and destroying everything. All right. We move on to liberty of conscience. As for liberty of conscience, to worship at will, in other words, to worship any kind of worship is nonsense. That's natural. that I have a right to go for moral liberty or license in matters of religion is nonsense. That I have a right to go for what the church teaches in matters of religion, absolutely true. So, liberty of conscience, if by it you mean just any religion at all, that's nonsense. But if you mean liberty to be a Catholic, that's absolutely true. That's Christian. But this freedom to obey God is, as far as the liberals are concerned, an attack on their state, because you're restricting their liberty to worship whatever worship they like. Therefore, the same principle applies. In all four, worship, speech, teaching, or conscience, in all of those four freedoms, it's always the same. There is an end to attain which is the real liberty, and there is a modern version by which there's no end outside of man, and he becomes his own end, and that is craziness. And each of those four cases, you've got exactly the same pattern. The doctrine of tolerance is very important. 32 to 35. Sure enough, the liberties of the liberals, the false liberties that the liberals have preached, man is his own end and man can has a right to do whatever he likes, they have proved a grave and bitter disappointment. But in order to avoid a greater evil, the church may tolerate but never approve these false liberties. There's the doctrine. There has to be a justice. In order to tolerate a false liberty or to tolerate error, there must be a higher good, because to tolerate error is not a good thing. Because you're allowing the destruction of minds, you're allowing heresy, you're allowing damnation of souls. Therefore, it's not a good thing to tolerate error. If the church tolerates error, it's in order to achieve a greater good, which is the eventual conversion, for instance, of a number of souls who would not be converted, who would be anti-converted if I tried crashing in and censoring without their understanding what's going on. So the church has the right to back off exercising her rights, or exercising the rights of truth, in order to achieve a greater good. And that's the church's right to exercise tolerance. But it's not a duty to exercise tolerance. In no way, time or place is it a duty to exercise tolerance. Because error has no rights. And therefore error never has rights. However, all such tolerance of evil for the common good or for a greater good is a sign of imperfection. And so if you've got a liberal society where the church has to tolerate a lot of evil, it's an imperfection and not a perfection. Today, people pride themselves on their tolerance. They pride themselves on they think that to tolerate evil is a mark of perfection. Look at me, I'm tolerant. But it isn't a mark of perfection at all. It's a mark of an imperfect situation where you can't do better than tolerate evil. Better would be to eliminate evil. It's a sign of imperfection. And the tolerance of evil, Catholic tolerance, has nothing to do with the tolerance by liberals of error for its own sake. See, again, the Catholic Church may be driven in practice to tolerate for the sake of a higher good. But the liberals don't tolerate as a second best. For liberals, toleration is a first best. Toleration is an ideal. Just like sincerity is an ideal. What's more important for a mind, sincerity or truth? Truth, yes. Objective truth is more important than subjective sincerity. Subjectively, I think that this river is perfectly, sincerely, I think this river is perfectly safe to swim in. I sincerely think so. Well, that's not going to help if the river is in fact treacherous. Doesn't matter what I sincerely think. The important thing is to think the truth about the river, not think whatever I think sincerely. It's obvious, it's common sense. You come up to this bridge which is over the river, and just about you're about to drive onto the bridge, somebody says, the engineer who built this bridge was very sincere. Oh yes? He sincerely thought that he knew as much as the engineers that had gone through university. Oh yes? You mean he didn't go through university? No, he sincerely thought it didn't matter. Oh? So, and he designed his bridge according to what he sincerely thought? Yes. Thanks very much, I'll find another bridge. It doesn't matter how sincere he is. You know, either the bridge is properly built or it isn't. And what you need to know about the bridge is not whether the engineer was sincere. You need to know whether the bridge is truly built in accordance with the laws of engineering. That's what you need. It doesn't matter how sincere Mohammedans and Jews and Buddhists and Hindus are. As Mohammedans, Buddhists, Hindus and Jews, they're not going to get to heaven. It doesn't matter how sincere they are, normally speaking. What I want to know is not the religion which will make me sincerely feel, or make me feel sincere and tingly all over. What I want is the religion which is going to get me to heaven, whether it makes me feel tingly all over or not. That's a good journalist phrase. It made me feel tingly and sincere all over. That's exactly it. That's this modern slush. Yeah. That's it. Did our Lord feel sincere and tingly all over when he was on the cross? No, I'll bet you he didn't. Bet you he felt pretty darned horrible. But that's where he was meant to be. That's where he was. We thank him for it. Without him being on that cross, we would all of us be in one blank of a mess. But it wasn't thanks to his feeling tingly that you and I got saved. It's thanks to his doing what was objectively right and obeying the truth that you and I are saved. All right. So Michael Davis will pick up again this question of tolerance or toleration. Toleration is a second-rate virtue. It's an imperfect virtue. It's a virtue which you have to exercise in an imperfect situation. So we move on to the conclusion. Leo concludes. Firstly, he has a summary. And then secondly, he has an overview of the rights of man. And notice, revolution, democracy, and independence. And he measures those things by the Catholic faith. Revolution, as he says, is not necessarily a bad thing. Democracy is not necessarily a bad thing. Independence is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as all three are in accordance with truth and justice. In other words, out there, there's a moral measure of these things. If these things are in line with the measure, fine. If they aren't, they're no good. So, well, let's have a look at his summary. Firstly, the essential vice of liberalism, 36. In brief, liberalism throws off the authority of God, and it's the authority of God which alone, by, for instance, the Ten Commandments, can direct man to fly safely to his destination. So it's the authority of God and the law of God which guides natural liberty to make it into moral liberty and make sure that a man saves his soul. But the liberals throw off the authority of God. They throw off good and evil. They throw off any measure out there, and they make themselves the measure of what's right and wrong. They make themselves God. They throw off the authority of God. And then 37 to 41, this is interesting again. He's got various grades of liberalism. Archbishop Lefebvre always used to say, it's a French expression, there are 36 kinds of liberalism. I mean, there are 36 grades. You've got all shades of liberalism. And one and the same man can be an extremist in the morning and a moderate in the afternoon, and then an anti-liberal in the evening, and then back to being a liberal the following day. It's terrible. I mean, you go to your local parish priest, and you say to him, Father, I'd love a Tridentine Mass because I really dig the Tridentine Mass. He says, yes, I agree with you. What you don't see is that in the evening, Miss Progressive Hijinks goes to see him, and she says, Father, I would like an absolutely up-to-date Mass. And he says, yes, I agree with you. So, you see, and then Cardinal Ratzinger says the traditional Mass is a good thing, but then the Novice Order Mass is also a good thing, and it's a good thing for the Hamiltons to do the Mohammedan thing, and that's liberal traditionalism. We aren't liberal traditionals. The Tridentine Mass is the law of God, and it's the requirement of God. God demands that we all celebrate the sacrifice of his Son with a proper rite. It's not a permission or a consent to celebrate the Tridentine Mass. It is a command and an order, unless and until the Pope one day is to issue a rite which is at least as serious and at least as traditional as the Tridentine rite. Then we would be obliged to celebrate that instead. But it's difficult to imagine how he could make a rite as traditional as the Tridentine rite. So for the time being, at least, the Tridentine rite is it. And the Tridentine rite is a command. It's not an option or a choice.
Is that a takeoff from the Last Supper, do this in commemoration of me and the authority that he vested in Peter and
Yes,
the apostles?
yes,
To
yes.
form his church and what?
Yes, but he did not give to his popes authority to change the whole thing around. He gave his popes authority to make minor changes, for instance, introduce the Feast of the Sacred Heart. That came in after the Tridentine Mass. The Feast of the Immaculate Heart came in after the Tridentine Rite. The details the popes can change, but the popes have no right to throw the whole thing over and bring in something brand new. So he then again grades it. Look at the gradation from 37 to 41. Firstly, God is completely rejected. But then God is accepted, but the church is rejected. The church is completely rejected, 38. God is accepted, but the church is partly rejected, 39 and 40. And then 41 is the most subtle and probably the most dangerous of all. God is accepted, and the church is accepted, but the church needs to be adapted. That's exactly Vatican II. So you can see here again the gradation of liberalism. He had a bit of that gradation in 15, 16, 17, 18, where we saw radical liberalism and then moderate liberalism. Here he's got it more finely calibrated. Firstly, God rejected. Absolute liberalism throws off God absolutely in public and in private. Moderate liberalism throws off, quote-unquote, only the supernatural law, which leads to separation of church and state. That's the American system, and the English system as well. Some separators are for the state disregarding the church altogether. Others are for the state, again, quote-unquote, only, depriving the church of her rights as a perfect society. In other words, some of the liberals are extremists, some of them are more subtle, but the end result is the same, says Leo. With God, it's all or nothing. You've got to give God all that he wants, and if you take away anything, you're disregarding God. If you disregard God in one thing, you're disregarding him in everything. Because the real God demands to be regarded in everything. And if I have a right to disregard him in anything, he's not the real God. He's just a pussycat. And if I have a right to undo one stitch, then I have the right to undo all the other stitches as well, and logically all the other stitches will come undone. So, others are for the state only, depriving the church of her rights as a perfect society. Others, again, are for the state, even recognizing the church and even recognizing her rights, just so long as, there's always a little poison in the tail, just so long as she gets with it. In other words, we love God, we believe in God, we love the Catholic Church, we believe in the Catholic Church, we believe in the Catholic Church's rights, but she does need to lift up her skirts a bit and get with it. The Archbishop said, Jesus Christ is neither liberal nor reformable. He does not need to get with it. Pius IX said it in his famous syllabus of 1864. The Catholic Church does not need to get with it, is what he said. Or he said, the Catholic Church needs to get with it, proposition condemned. Damnable proposition. The Catholic Church does not need to get with it. The Catholic Church is always old and always new. It's always fresh. It's always up to date. The great truths of our Lord are always up to date. Always and everywhere up to date. They just need applying. And so you've got there the gradation of liberalism. And then, as I said, he comes into the rights of man. Therefore, it follows, man has no right to unconditional lack of constraint. In other words, the free use, the unlimited use of his natural liberty. Man has no right to the unlimited use of his free will in any domain. In every domain, free will must be channeled into moral liberty by law, the law concerning that domain. Man has a right to revolt only for the liberty of the people or for the liberty of the church from evil and to do good. The American Revolution was not wholly unjustified. What's a Catholic judgment upon the American Revolution? That's an interesting question, and you need to study the whole thing from a Catholic point of view. But the drama is that from the very beginning of the Catholic Church in the United States, the churchmen were Americanists. starting with Carroll, starting with Archbishop Carroll.
Wasn't his brother the head of the Masonic Lodge?
Something like that. Something like that, yes.
He was a member of the Masonic.
Was I a member? Yeah.
He was the head of it, was he? Yep. According
Yeah.
to Solange.
Solange Hertz, yes. She's good. She's a bit hard, but she's good. She's on the ball. She is on the ball. Solange Hertz, S-O-L-A-N-G-E. Her books are well worth reading. I think you're entitled, in my humble opinion, you're entitled to take them with a pinch of salt here and there. But generally, she's much, much more right than she is wrong.
She's easy read, too.
Yes, yeah. Solange Hertz. There are very few that are as clear and straight as she is. The Star-Spangled Heresy, Utopia, and what's another one? There's a third one that's come out. I forget. But on this question of Americanism, the Solange Hertz, the Star-Spangled Heresy is very good. Yeah, Star-Spangled Heresy.
That's where she accused Carroll of being.
Yes, yeah. She's surely right. Unfortunately, she doesn't always quote her sources, so you can't sort of back up what but she's right. She's right. Man has a right to revolt for the church's liberty from evil to do good. For instance, when Franco rose up in revolt against communism in Spain in the 1930s, that was an absolutely justified revolt. It was a popular revolt led by Franco and the Spanish officers against Bolshevik communism, which had taken over in Spain and was smashing the Catholic Church. And the Catholics rose up, and they had every right to. There's an example. So not every revolution is wrong. And the American Revolution was not completely wrong, as I was saying to you, because the British monarchy was far from completely right, because the British monarchy had kicked the Catholic Church in the teeth. Therefore, it was justice that the British monarchy in turn got kicked in the teeth. Unfortunately, George Washington, however, didn't, instead of going back to the Catholic Church, brought in a new system which, etc., etc., etc. So we saw that yesterday. All right. Then a man has a right to self-government only if he recognizes that all authority comes from God. Authority does not come from the people, says Leo XIII. Authority comes from God. In which case, all participation of people in public affairs is approved by the church. If you've got a people, every one of whom recognizes that authority comes from God, there's nothing wrong with a democracy. Nothing wrong.
The South Dakota motto is, under God, the people rule.
That's a tongue twister.
Yeah, take a little plot. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you see, that sounds like they're putting together the two things.
Yeah.
It would be the under God part is good. And apparently that was only put on US coins in the 1950s. It's interesting, yeah. There was some godliness in the United States. There was some godliness in the United States as late as the 1950s. And that's what made the strength of the United States and the glory of the United States. And finally, he has a right to independence and a right to property only in subordination to justice. So the question of independence is a question of justice, and the question of property is a question of justice, which again is a measure out there, and all Catholic moral theology is a measure out there of how man behaves. If man does what the law says, then he's right, and if he doesn't do what he's wrong. Man is a measured and judged and subordinate creature. That's what the Masons don't want. They want man to be God. David.
I have a question, Your Excellency.
Yes, sure.
You were defining naturalism as the over-exaggeration of nature.
Yes.
And liberalism as the over-exaggeration of liberty.
Yes.
Could you reconcile that for me with what Leo XIII is saying here, where liberalism is the implementation of naturalism in the moral and political realm?
Liberalism is the implementation of naturalism in the moral and political realm. Yes, in other words, liberty of action. naturalism is the theoretical principle. He said they're making a distinction of nature in things, in being, the nature of being, and then liberty in action. So as action follows being, so liberalism follows naturalism. If you want to think of naturalism as belonging to the realm of being and liberalism as belonging to the realm of action, yes. Yes, liberty applies to action, so liberalism is the exaggeration of liberty in action, and it follows from naturalism, which is the exaggeration of nature over supernature in the line of being. Does that make sense? The old principle is that action follows being. I mean, I have to exist before I can act. Action follows being. This thing is round, therefore, in action, it rolls. If it was square in being, it would not roll in action. Action follows being. It's common sense. So liberalism, the Pope then is saying, is in the realm of action, whereas naturalism is in the realm of being. But I think my broad qualification still applies, namely that that's why they're called that. Liberalism, liber in Latin is free, and naturalism, that's nature's, and the isms are the exaggerations. Okay? But you might say that, in that respect, liberalism in action follows from naturalism in thinking about being, yes. Any other questions for the moment? Yes, Doctor.
Your summary...
runs out of gas at the bottom?
Well,
that's just...
You're summarizing that the Pope says that man has, quote, a right to self-government, close quote, only if he recognizes all authority to be from God.
Yes.
In which case all participation in public affairs is approved.
All public participation, the people. Yes.
Okay. Is that really possible? It would seem...
That's another question.
Okay, so it would seem that if you say, well, we're all unspotted Catholics, and we know authority comes from God, but we're going to elect this mayor, or we're going to elect this representative, or elect this senator, with time, you're still going to start thinking that the authority is in your hands.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
And it seems
Yes.
funny to...
Yes. There is that built-in danger of democracy, but if you've got a people of saints, if you have a people of saints, that danger will be diminished.
That's why monarchy is a symbolic.
That is why...
I'm sorry?
Isn't that built into every system, though? I mean, if you've got a monarchy, it's going to tend eventually to be the divine right of kings. I mean, I am king. I mean,
I don't know if I agree with that. I think
well,
that
the history is that's what happened. I mean, that's history. I mean, even Louis XIV, the Catholic king, fought divine right of kings.
Well, what I'm saying is...
This stuff they taught sin law.
Any one of the three systems, broadly there are three systems: democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy, right? Ruled by one, ruled by a few, ruled by the people. There are those three systems. And in fact, any system is usually a mixture of those three. You rarely meet, there's practically never a system which is purely one or the one. If you have a people, the people nevertheless need a ruling class and usually some individual. And if you've got a ruling class, they usually need one amongst them to sort of guide, and then there's got to be some participation by the people. So that in the United States today, you've got, it's a democracy so-called, but nevertheless you have Congress, which is a kind of aristocracy, and you've got a president. You've got a one and a few and the people. Under Louis XIV, you had it was a monarchy, it was called a monarchy, but in fact there was also an aristocracy immediately under him, and then a lot of power actually devolved down by the principle of subsidiarity, and there was a lot of power went down the tree. It was not all up at the top. So in fact any system is likely to include all three, and each has its danger. But the particular danger of the democracy is that the people are liable to think that they are the source of authority. That is the danger. Given human nature, that is the danger of democracy. Given human nature, the danger of monarchy is that they may be tempted to turn into tyrants. How well monarchy has served the church and how well democracy has served the church is something that you have to study by looking at all the ages of history. And there, I think you have to admit that the monarchy, many more Catholic countries have been essentially monarchic than they've been essentially democratic.
Well, many more which means